There we go. Recording is in progress. All right.
I still don't see anything. I'm sorry, Gordy.
You don't see a black screen with the word welcome on it?
No. No, all I see is the strip with all of our club members on it, but nothing else.
Does anybody else see the welcome?
Yes. Coming
Yeah, we
through.
can see it.
I see it.
All right.
I'm the only one who doesn't see it, it seems.
Okay, we've narrowed it down, Ian, to it's your computer.
Okay.
Ian, go up. Ian, go
Click
up.
on the strip.
Ian, go up to the upper right, click
Yeah.
view and hit standard and you'll be in, I think you'll be in good shape.
Okay. No.
Okay, as Ian flails away, I will tell everybody welcome to the March 2022 virtual meeting of the Camera Club of Brevard. This is what we're going to do tonight. We're going to have an Instagram virtual photo walk postings from February. Symbol was the theme for running out and getting a picture of a symbol somewhere in February. Whatever you thought symbol meant to you. So, and in March is story. We've got some competition updates. We got what's coming down the pike, and tonight we have Roman. Don't let me butcher your name. How's your last name go?
Smith, just like it's spelled. I don't see the problem. I don't
Okay.
know.
Roman, we got tonight Roman. I don't see the problem.
Courage check. Thank you.
Photographing birds from portraits to flight. So we're looking forward to Roman and his presentation tonight. This last month, we had Camera Club of Brevard hashtag challenge from the Chuck gives us every month. And some of the hashtag challenges for symbol that were posted up on Instagram or up here. And we just go through these, Roman, just for your background. These are just folks that post them with the hashtag. And just something to keep us busy while we were all locked down, and it's become somewhat of a favorite thing for us to do. So all these are a symbol to somebody. And we got a pretty good collection. Okay, and March's virtual photo walk challenge is story. So whatever is a story to you. Did you want to talk about it, Chuck?
You know, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, so let's see if we can produce one picture that tells a story. And there's an example there on Gordy's screen. And if you will, as usual, send your photographs to the Camera Club of Brevard hashtag on Instagram or to the Camera Club of Brevard email. We will put them in the f-stop. So looking forward to all the stories that we can see.
I seem to remember an old rock and roll song, Chuck, called "Every Picture Tells a Story, Don't It?" I think it was the Rolling Stones. Am I right? Anybody?
Rod Stewart, I think.
Was it Rod Stewart? Okay, well, there you go.
That's what Nancy says.
You know, you're right. It is Rod Stewart. I knew it was somebody screaming into a microphone, and Mick Jagger came to mind.
I think I would take issue to that not every picture tells a story, but
That's true. Okay. From our competition director, thanks for your support. These are the remaining, including this month, but the remaining competition themes for the rest of this year and for the beginning of next year. Sometimes we have folks that always ask for a little help with presenting their pictures or sending in their pictures. So there's a couple different files available, or a couple different presentations on our website. If you go to ccbrevard.org/articles, There's one in there for use by folks that use the Mac. And I think that was written by Peter. And there's, for those of us who use PCs, there's one by Chuck. And they give you a little bit of help on how to prepare a picture and some of the ways to get your picture ready for sending in. So anyway, that's out there for you and ready to go. Richard, did you have something or did you just pop up? I guess he just popped up. Okay, this is just a quick and dirty of some of the launches coming up in the next, give or take month. And the top one there went today, so you can scratch that off, but I had it in there. And we've got a couple Starlinks. We got one coming up day after tomorrow, and that'll be more or less 9:30 in the morning. And then we have another Starlink on March 8th, which is next week. And then we have the Falcon 9 Axiom is a manned launch off of 39A going to the space station. That's coming up March 30th. And then we have another Atlas like today's launch, and that's going to be a United States Space Force Satellite 12. So there's some information there. Richard, did you want to talk a little bit about future programs? We've got a couple on here.
Okay, I was muted. Sorry about that. Yeah, in April, we have Lisa and John Merrill. It's going to be a fascinating program on creative blur. It's called ICM, Intentional Camera Movement. So it's how to get creative pictures by just moving your camera around. They actually visited our January meeting and talked about it a little bit, but it's going to be some ways to create some very artistic photos. You can see the one in the bottom that looks like a little zoom with probably some panning in there also. And then I just tuned in, Gordon. I don't know if you mentioned anything about a potential May meeting.
That's the next slide. So there you go.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's probably up to you to introduce this and not me.
Well, May is going to be our return to in-person meetings.
Yay!
And, I know there's a whole bunch of people that are rip-roaring and waiting for that to happen, and I'm kind of in that camp as well. So we're going to try and co-Zoom the meeting for those who are at risk or cannot attend. And that's going to be a little bit of a challenge because I don't think there's Wi-Fi in the building, so we might have to use a hotspot. I have no idea how effective the co-Zooming is going to be, but we'll give it a try. Couple things to look forward to in the May meeting. We'll have a club-wide critique of member photos instead of a presenter. And this Richard and I kicked this around. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the pictures that people put in, and somebody may have a different suggestion or a different thought on various pictures, and we're going to do that. So basically, it's going to get us back to talking to each other again, and we're going to try and do that in May. In our first in-person get together. The May photo competition will still be digital. So Pat will be taking all the pictures, 2000 max on the long edge and all those rules. And that'll be for May. And then we'll probably resume printing, doing printing competitions instead of digital competitions for June. So that's to be determined. I mean, that's an indefinite, that's way out there in my book. But anyway, that's what we're kind of looking forward to in May. So tonight we have Roman and sounds just like it's spelled, photographing birds from portraits to flight. And Roman's got a lot of experience with various lens companies, and also he's a leader of many expeditions where we go out and do photo expeditions and so on. And there's his website right there, and he is a bird photographer. So what I'm going to do is unshare and turn it over to him for him to share and take over.
All right, we just tried it, right? Yeah, of course it's gone. We tried it before we started, right? So.
Yes, we did.
And it's not there, so great. So let me go back and see what happened here, because we don't have the program now. So here we go. Let's try that. See what that does. Let's see if it's on the share screen. All right. Hey, there it is. It's back. All right. Does everybody see that, the first slide?
I've got it here.
Yeah.
Looks
It's
like
a
a
bluebird.
Yeah, bluebird.
Yeah.
Looks
Yeah.
like a spoonbill in flight to me, but I'm going to shut up now and let Roman take it.
All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you for having me to your Camera Club. So what the bio doesn't say, I'm a Camera Club member in New Jersey for over 35 years. We just moved down to the Fort Myers area. I've been coming down to Florida to photograph birds for over 30 years. I run workshops and tours. I'm actually going to send a special for you guys because I have at the end of the month a 1 day or 2 day workshops that I'm going to be doing. If you guys are interested in driving across the state to the Sarasota area. But, you know, again, I've been doing this for quite a while, and because of my background in the Camera Club, I try to teach educational how to. So as I told everybody, if you have a question, unmute yourself, ask me then and there on the spot if you don't understand. I think that works better as far as teaching. If you guys want to see me, there's my website, there's my email, take a screenshot of it. You know, Instagram. I have private workshops. So, you know, there you go. I have one that, you know, you can use for that. If you don't feel like being in a group, because most of my workshops, I only take 4. But if you want private, I do that as well. So let's get started. And I always start with the basics. And why basics? Because I keep seeing a lot of mistakes. We've talked about this earlier, but time of day, and in bird photography, it's about the zone. What is the zone and what is time of day? Time of day generally here in Florida is a half hour before sunrise to 2.5 hours after sunrise, to 2.5 hours before sunset, to a half hour after. That's when the light is the most spectacular. And that pretty much works across the northern hemisphere. In some areas, depending on the time of the year, it lasts longer. But by and large, you know, that is what you want to think about the time of day. So why? I can tell what time of day you took the picture based on the shadows, number one, and the color of the image. Think about it. When the sun is really, really low on the horizon, the shadows are soft and very long. You know, they're like you're a 20-foot tall person in the first light. As it starts to rise, it gets a little more yellow. The shadows become a little more harsh, and probably 2.5 to 3 hours afterwards, here in Florida especially, you're on the closer to the equator, the shadows get very, very harsh. So that's when I can tell when you took the shot, and that's going to make all the difference in the world of the feather detail and everything else. And we're going to talk about that. So this is out on Nickerson Beach in Long Island. I know a lot of you are snowbirds. This is probably March, mid-March to late March. Oyster catchers are going to be there. So very first light, I don't concentrate on birds in flight because I don't have enough shutter speed, and I'm going to talk about that. But because of that low light, I have detail in my whites and in my dark blacks. So that's time of day. The light gets harsh. No camera on this planet is going to be able to handle the contrast and color. So just think about that when you're out there, and make this effort to get out there on your own. This is early morning light on the spoonbill flying. I do the private charters on the boat. Look how soft all the shadows are, number one. Number two, because the sun angle's low, the light's getting into the spoonbill's eyes. So was a stormy day, so that's the darker gray background. But the sun pops out when it's low. That's when you're going to get that perfect lighting on your bird. If I'm shooting against the sun, listen, I don't want detail in the feathers here. I want it to be a silhouette. I'm shooting and exposing for the colors on the water. So if I'm shooting against the sunlight, I'm going to go with a silhouette. But 99% of the time, you're going to see me set up with the sun directly at my back. First, we've all been home for 2 years due to we know what. I won't even mention it. But this is the first bald eagle I've captured in New Jersey because I was sitting at home and I'm tired. And how do I know the bird's from New Jersey? The little bling on the feet, the silver one's federal protection. Green defines what state it is. So if you want to know where your bald eagle is by the band, this will tell you, but green is New Jersey. And I caught it up the Hudson River last February. Spoonbills down here in Florida, when that light is so low and you're able to capture this against the dark mangroves, it is just spectacular. So for me, I'm going to tell you how to do birds in flight, what my settings are, but I'm going to repeat this over and over and over again. It's the light, the light, the light. So
Bowman, how much post-processing did you do? Contrast.
Okay, so on this one, we will remind me to talk about histogram, but I'll talk a little bit about it. It's not much because I'm going to tell you about me shooting manual mode and why I shoot manual mode. When the mangroves are generally dark at that time of day. If you looked at my histogram, it would probably be even pegged to the left. I don't care the exposures about the bird. I want to make sure I have no blown highlights on the neck in particular and the thing. And when I tell people about the histogram, I'm going to remind you of the bald eagle. If you get the body right, but you blow out the head, you've got garbage. So sun at my back, the exposure is about the whites on the bird. A vast majority of birds have white on them somewhere on their body. We'll see a few that don't. But bottom line is you're going to expose for white. So remind me to talk about this more in depth because I've got that on the exposure section. But I hate post-processing. I take hundreds of thousands of images per year. My least favorite place on earth is behind the computer processing images. So I want to teach you how to get it right in camera. So that way you don't have to mess around with that. The mangroves were very dark. If you looked at my histogram, the blacks were almost clipped. I'm not going to pull them up. I want that difference in contrast between the background and the bird.
Thank you.
So again, half hour before sunrise to 2.5 hours after. Overcast changes the rules, but remember the sun is still high. So if it's going to get into the bird's eye, you have to be in a location that you have that opportunity to be shooting down at them, which isn't very many places. So the zone. This is the big one. Sun's at my back. You stick your hands out, 20 degrees in either side. That's where you want to be concentrating your photographic efforts. Why? Because if you shoot against that light off that angle, you're going to get harsher shadows. You're going to introduce shadows across the body, shadows across the face. So these two go hand in hand. So you want to make sure that when you're photographing this, again, wood storks, black and white. So I'm exposing for the whites, always, 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 and I'm going to tell you what mode and everything else like that. But because the sun is at my back and it's a low angle, the sun's getting into the eye, and I have detail in the whites, and majority of the blacks. Tricolored herons. You know, if you exposed for the midtones, that chest breast area would be blown out, especially if they raise their wings. You're going to be toast. Is, you know, again, I'm going to mention it again. Is the exposure about the dark mangrove water, or is it about a tricolored heron? It's on the bird. So we'll talk about metering, all this other stuff, but remember, expose for whites, because vast majority of your birds down here, especially in Florida, have some kind of white in it. This isn't actually a purple gallinoo. It's another name. I forget it offhand. This is in Lakeland, Florida area. It's at a local park. So you're just trying to keep the exposure correct. But if you look at my histogram, because most of the background was water, it'd be, you know, skewed to the left. I'm just making sure I have no blown highlights and let the dark areas fall where they may. Bald eagle in New Jersey, again, chasing it last year on an overcast day. So we're going to talk about ISO in depth. My friends, you know, laugh at me that I roll out of bed at ISO 800. Literally roll out if I'm photographing birds in flight, because you need speed for birds in flight, shutter speed. But here again, I'm exposing for the whites. Let the details fall where they may on the dark areas, but especially on an overcast day, I'm going to be able to bring them up in post-processing. I'm shooting raw, obviously, with either the black slider or the shadow slider. I'm going to bring them up as much as I feel I need to. Compositional elements, shooting angle, head angle, background. Busy backgrounds. I've seen way too many bird pictures wrecked with a background that's too cluttered and competes with the subject. Shooting up or down, for those of you who photograph children and people. Make eye contact, right? You got to be shooting at their angle. So if the bird's 9 inches tall, guess what? You got to sit down. I don't have to tell Floridians, watch where you sit because of fire ants, but at the very least, I'm not the guy who's going to lay down on his belly, but I will sit down. And longer focal lengths will help you there. And as far as head angle, if you took a picture of a human being, I'm going to turn around like this, looking away from you, you'd be fired. It's not a good portrait. So the beautiful part about bird photography is parallel to the plane to right at you. They're all acceptable head angles. But I do not want to see go away birds. I don't want to see the back of the head. That's just not acceptable for people, wildlife, other wildlife. It's just a no-no. So be patient, make sure you get it. And, you know, we pulled up on these guys, lilac-breasted rollers, on my tour into Tanzania. And, you know, I don't have the shot because I didn't click the button. They pulled up and it was a thorn bush that he was sitting on, okay? But when he originally stopped the vehicle, the background was the entire thorn bush with thorns sticking out of his head, body, and everything else like that. You know, I told him, move up 10 meters, 30 feet approximately. We had grasses as the background and a beautiful perch. Watch your backgrounds. One of the most beautiful portraits on earth. This is Little Estero Lagoon out here on Fort Myers Beach, probably 8 years back. I'm exposing for the whites on the bird because I don't care that the dark mangroves are in the shadow making the water black. My exposure is on the great blue heron. I want to make sure there's no blown highlights. So I could bring up the water more, but why? You know, I'm exposing for the detail on the bird so there's no distracting elements. Gatorland, closer to you guys in Orlando. You know, they're in the mangroves. If you're going to start metering and saying, okay, what's my correct exposure? I'm going to tell you first and foremost that your histogram is your Bible. It's your holy grail. It is everything that you can want it to be. Put your exposure as far to the right of a histogram are whites without having any blown highlights. Highlight alert indicator should be on, no blinkies, because the background is immaterial. If your meter sees all that dark greenery, it's going to try to overexpose. That's why I'm going to use manual. That's why we're going to talk about how I set my exposure. But you want to make sure you expose for the bird, not the background. Shooting down, that's an easy one. If you're on a tripod, drop your tripod down. Like I said, I'm not telling you to lay down on the ground. I usually don't like that look anyway, because legs tend to get clipped. But the longer focal length helps you in every situation. So, you know, these are burrowing owls. They're all over Florida, here in Cape Coral, just outside of me. They're at the library. Where else do you expect to find them? But let me tell you something. If the sun angle was higher, so this is a late afternoon shot, you're talking about, you know, the brow casting a shadow over the eye. So that light angle matters, you know, so you got to be careful when you're taking these pictures that your time of day, the angle, the zone, all that other good stuff to give you the best possible image. Again, I go to local parks. I'm sure you guys have that by you. You know, there's duck droppings everywhere. I bring a plastic leaf and long garbage bag or wear my rain pants so I could sit down and not worry about the cooties or whatever we want to call them. And, you know, that way I'm shooting a little bit more eye level with these ducks. I just moved from New Jersey this year in July. My water temperature never gets to your water temperature. So I would get off the boat in March and get into the water to photograph these guys eyeball to eyeball. Now on the pontoon boat with the longer focal lengths that I use, I'm shooting eyeball to eyeball sitting comfortably on the boat. So that's on the boat, handheld, and we're going to talk about gear shortly. So shooting up. So this is all full frame focal lengths that I'm giving you. So just for those of you who don't know, a 150 to 600 of the world today on an APS-C sensor, crop sensor, for Nikon is 900 millimeter effectively. For a Canon system, it's 960. So for wildlife photography, I recommend APS-C sensor. Those of you who have switched to Olympus and Fuji for the micro four thirds, your sensor is 2x magnification. Now they have lighter lenses that are, you know, 200 to 800 that weigh almost nothing. So the moral of this story is don't get closer because you're going to be shooting up. Back up, back up, back up. So, you know, been coming down here for a while. So what's the best thing to do? Go to a fishing pier. Where there's fishermen, there will be birds. So we're standing on the Sanibel fishing pier here where they're, you know, actively fishing. And the guy throws out his line, the pelican, you know, turns really quick and you hear 5 shutters just going, you know, exploding. So go to where they are. You are all fortunate that you live in a very good area. Close to you, I know there's Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. You know, so you've got a lot of places near you that are actually excellent birding spots. This was handheld on a boat. The smaller the bird, the degree of difficulty goes up. But the difference is now, we were just talking about gear a little bit yesterday. The new mirrorless cameras, so a Sony A9, I think I tried it out 4 years ago, had eye detection system. The new Canon systems have that. The new Nikon systems have that. And I believe Olympus has it as well. So guess what? These new eye detection systems where they're tracking on the eye of a bird, well, they're not perfect, but let me tell you this. If the focus point is on the body of a bird that's this big, you know, as my hand, it's in there. So, you know, the new technology is really growing in leaps and bounds to allow you to do bird photography like never before. So, but notice my light direction, everything else like that are still in my zone and sun at my back. The bigger the bird, the slower they are. So this guy's flying by, we're standing on the pontoon boat, and there's a little jetty right over his wingtips. I stood up. I'm using a long lens, so I stood up. So, you know, I'm always paying attention to the background and then keeping all the other factors in place. This was also, again, we parked the pontoon boat. We were just sitting there. They were coming back and forth with nesting material. And, you know, you're just trying to lock onto these little rockets. The smaller the bird, the faster they are. So depth of field. The reason I don't talk about depth of field much, there's apps for that. And the moral of the story is the closer you get, the less depth of field you have. So if you go to Gatorland, resist the temptation, or St. Augustine, I will be teaching up there, you know, next month. Be careful about getting closer to your subject because your depth of field shrinks. When I'm 100 millimeter, 86 feet away, I'm now 960 millimeter with my crop factor and 600 millimeter lens. I have 11 inches of depth of field. So that means the small birds are in there. If I get to f8, I probably have 2 feet of depth of field. So the big problem is if you get closer to your subject. Getting closer to your subject is not your friend. If you're doing a nest and you can go to f11 and f13 and drop your shutter speed, that's fine. But the closer you get towards your subject, the less depth of field you're going to have. Keeping your subject parallel to the sensor, you know, or film plane. I'm not even going to get into the whole film thing because I started, you know, 20 years ago with 92 rolls of film. I had 2 keepers. Now I get more every morning than I could ever dream. So again, keeping it parallel to the sensor plane helps you get more apparent depth of field. Depth of field doesn't change, but there's websites to tell you how much you have. So this is on Machias Seal Island off the coast of Maine. They still, I think, now are resuming these trips. They will be in July, probably the height of season, late June. I'm probably 5 feet away from this guy. So I had to go to f11 or f13 to be able to capture everything sharp. Because if I was at 5.6 or 6.3, I just wouldn't have enough depth of field from the fish to the eyeball. How much depth of field do I need on this guy? He's like a pancake, you know, so being wide open at 6.3, I know I've got, and 600 millimeter, I know I've got enough depth of field to capture this guy. So now I'm just focusing on locking focus, locking focus, locking focus, and trying to track him. Bigger guy, still 600 millimeter. We're on the boat, probably f8 at this time of day. I probably have 5.6 of depth of field. So his wingspan is in there because I'm backing up, backing up, backing up. With all the megapixels that you have on today's cameras, I tell you that if you have to back up, put a teleconverter on, or just back up and crop, it's probably more effective than getting closer. So just keep that in mind when you're photographing birds. Getting closer is definitely not your friend. Little guys, you know, from front to back, maybe 12 inches. And head angle, I am a card carrying member of the head angle police, parallel to you, slightly at you, to right at you. But look at all the images when I go back. Sun's at my back, sun's at my back. They're in the zone. minimizing the shadows, time of day, the shadow behind the owl is low, the light's getting into his eyes. All these things are being combined to create the images. Now, this is Gatorland. The more heads you introduce, the degree of difficulty goes up. All right. So we've talked about the exposure. You guys are relatively close. It's in the Orlando area, you know, so you're close to Gatorland. They work well with photographers because they give you photography passes on certain days to get in early in the morning before the public is allowed and to stay late after the place closes. But you can't concentrate on 3 heads. They're doing this. Wah, 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 wah. So as a photographer, I tell you to control what you can. When you see mom or dad's face, take the shots. You know, you're going to be on high speed, continuous, whatever your camera does. And you're just anytime you see mom or dad's eyes. And shoot a little looser so you don't clip wingtips if they wind up flapping their wings. Pay attention to what you can control, which is mom or dad looking at it. Whatever else is out of your control, don't worry about it. Just wait till you see mom or dad and then fire away and pick which one works for you when you get back home. Everybody says you got to go far. This is literally 3 feet out my dining room in New Jersey. I came downstairs, I heard the cat beating up the mini blinds, opened the blinds, saw this choir, threw the cat in the bathroom, locked the cat in the bathroom, took a piece of black mat board, made just enough of an opening for my lens to fit through, my macro lens sitting 3 feet in the dining room. And every time mom or dad came in feeding, I would take the shot. I probably have 200 images of mom and dad coming in with mom and dad in a great position. How many do you think I have of all the babies with the correct head angle? Welcome to the beautiful world of digital. I probably have 2 only of all the heads visible. And what do I care about the other 298 that I threw out? I don't. Don't let anybody fool you in bird photography that I can predict a wing position, I can predict head angles, or I can predict any of that. It's wildlife, it's unpredictable. If I kept them, I could show you, bill over the other one's eye, blah, 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 this and that, one head drooping straight down, headless one. You can't predict it. So again, memory is cheap compared to what we used to pay for film. Take the images, sort them out later. So what mode? Was probably one of my most controversial modes a long time ago, but unlike every other photography that you do, manual mode, especially with birds and birds in flight, the backgrounds can change. So light tone sand, dark water, the beach. So now I told you about time of day in the zone. So here's my workflow, for lack of a better word. I get out of the car. It's early in the morning. I'm going to set my lens to f6.3 because that's as low as it goes. I have a 150 to 600, and 6.3 at 600 millimeter is my, as low as I can go. ISO 800. Why 800? Because why 100? Most camera bodies don't have problems at ISO 800. So I'm choosing ISO 800 because I want to be able to get my shutter speed up for flight of birds. So I'm still in the parking lot. I put the sun in my back. I put the car, truck, whatever I'm using, go find one in the parking lot that's white or silver or a white sign. Take a picture of it. Put my histogram as far to the right as I can without clipping my highlights. Go out and photograph white birds. Guess what? By filling the frame with a car, a sign, a white sign that's going to be in the same light as the bird, white is white. as long as you keep it in the same lighting conditions. So I told you, don't shoot off 20 degrees off angle because things are going to change. But by taking that picture of the car or the truck, now I can walk out there and say, oh, great egret, little egret, great blue heron, any of them that have white, bald eagle, all of them have white in it. That's the proper exposure for white. So this guy, white along the neck, darker toned waters. If I set it in aperture priority, what would happen when my meter sees all that really dark mangrove? What happens if my meter sees the really neutral tone sky? It's going to blow the exposure. Manual exposure, not manual focus, manual exposure never gets fooled by the background as long as you keep it in your zone. I hope that makes sense to you guys because, just keep them in your zone and white is going to be white. Once you expose for it, it's going to be correct as long as they stay in your zone, no matter what the background is. And the meter can't be full. So why do people hate manual mode? I don't know. I'm making a movement among the pros to say I'm going to change it to aperture light because it just sounds cooler. Because in aperture priority, you choose an aperture. The problem is when it goes behind the cloud, it's going to change to your exposure. If you're in auto ISO and it goes behind the clouds, it's going to change your exposure for you. So how do you know how much of the background your meter's going to catch? You don't. So here's what you do in manual mode. You take a picture of that white car, truck, sign, whatever it is, in sunlight. Sun at your back. And then it's a cloudy day, so the sun goes behind the clouds. You take that same picture and note your exposure. Now you know the difference between that. Sunrise, sunset, the light's changing every 5 minutes or so. So by knowing that my meter is saying plus 1 1/3 or something like that, okay, let's just say this for argument's sake, that's where it is. I've seen it at +2 on certain camera bodies, mine, plus 1 2/3 on other ones. So you just check where that thing is. So when it drops behind the cloud, you don't do anything but dump some shutter speed and drop it to that same point. Bring it right back up to that point. Lining up the needle, I call it. So it's 1 1/3 is the correct exposure, whether it's in the shadows or in the sun, as long as the sun is in the same zone. So this guy, Sonny, took that test shot of the boat. Everything's perfect. He's flying, meter. If I missed a little bit of the background in my meter saying, oh my God, that water's dark, manual mode didn't get fooled. Sun goes behind the clouds. Guess what? It's still the same exposure for white. And now all I'm doing on a cloudy day is dumping shutter speed because I have a high ISO. So check that histogram. The histogram is really telling you something. So, to the left is your shadows and blacks. To the right is white. And for all you Canon body shooters like me out there, your histogram, combined luminosity histogram, we'll call it, you got to be careful of that right side. I tend to need to be a little further away from that. But these are all histograms that are all good. Look at that one. That one's kind of all in the middle. That one's kind of more to the right because I have sky and the white bird. And that one on the right is also correct because I'm not touching it. And it's probably mostly mangroves with a little bit of bird. They're all good. So there is nothing as a perfect histogram. And that one, at least if you have highlight alert indicator on, you see that big blown area, the blinkies we call them, then you know you're wrong. But again, on a white, gray, overcast day, it can work. You just got to be careful not to blow out your bird. So everybody has walked up to me over the years at conferences or whatever and says, well, I'm running my bird in flight images are soft. The first question I'm going to ask you always, and I have for the last 20 years, what was your ISO? If you tell me 100, 200, 400, I'm going to tell you that's your problem. Because a flying bird or long focal length that you're hand holding or even on a tripod tracking, softness can be done. Number one culprit, motion blur, and not acquiring, focus. The last one is not enough depth of field, but realize that a bird is cruising, depending on the bird, 20 to 60 miles per hour. So their feathers are doing this, right? And peregrine falcon dives at 200 miles an hour. Speed, speed, speed. So I want you to put the center point focus because it's the most forgiving. You could do center point enabled where 5 boxes around it are enabled. Different manufacturers have different things. Put on center point with eye detection on. Look where the body is, look where the eye of the guy is. If it misses the eye and goes onto the body, you're good with depth of field. So center point is the most forgiving, and that way you're just focused on keeping that spot on the body. Now let's discuss shoot. How tight should you shoot? If you're starting out, if you shoot loose and crop, you've got more megapixels than I've ever had on any camera at this point in time. I have 18 megapixels as my highest megapixel camera. I can get away with shooting tight on a great blue heron because I'll choose whether I want an upward swing or a downward swing because I have 10,000 of them, literally, So when you're first starting off trying to get birds in flight, I start at, say, I'm using a 150 to 600 at 200 millimeters, start zooming in to where I'm comfortable. And then I'll just, when I'm comfortable, just fire away. And I'll sometimes say, I don't care about the downward wing position if I cut that. So I will shoot tighter than what I recommend to you. But bottom line is shoot loose and crop. You have the megapixels. Again, time of day. The iridescence is only because of the time of day. So by keeping it on the body, depth of field from the bill to the back of the wings might be 3 feet at 600 millimeter. There's apps for that. There's depth of field calculators that at f8, how much depth of field you have on your particular camera body and lens combination. It's in there. So depth of field is rarely an area, and this is a pontoon boat. It's relatively calm water. Occasionally a jet ski comes by and, rocks our world. But you know what? When I'm at 1/2000th of a second, 1/4000th of a second, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world, my shaking or anything else. So raise your ISO. I start at 1800, 800. On my 1DX, I'll go up to, I don't care where I go up to with my 1DX. With my 7D Mark II, most I want to be at ISO 1600. So whenever I get to ISO, usually 1250, I'll switch to my 1DX, which is a full frame camera body. The 7D Mark II is an APS-C sensor, which gives me more reach. But now by having that high ISO philosophy, I can decide whether I need more depth of field. Hey, I'm at Gatorland and I'm 10 feet away from a nest. I need more depth of field. Sure, I got a high ISO. Fine. So this is handheld on the boat. This is 60 mile per hour action. I'm just focused on keeping a focus point on any body. You're not going to see the other 10 images that I cut off wingtips and everything else like that. I'm just trying to keep one focus point on the body. It's wildlife, right? They're birds. They're not going to tell you what they're going to do. I can tell you if they're preening, hence the feather in the bill, they're going to flap their wings. So why am I going to look to drop or change my ISO? What's the point? speed rules, fast shutter speed, high speed shutter, AI servo on Canon batteries, continuous on Nikon. You know, every manufacturer has their own thing. Speed, 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 speed. I want you to be at 1/1600th of a second or faster at all times. Now you're going to ask me, Roman, the duck looks like he's kind of sleeping or almost sleeping. Why do I need a 2,000th of a second, 4,000th of a second shutter speed? Well, believe it or not, hard to believe, I know. I was a Boy Scout way back when. What's the Boy Scout motto? Be prepared, right? So let's give an example that Pro One is sitting to one side and I'm sitting on one side, and he's of the philosophy, or she is of the philosophy, that use the appropriate ISO. Okay, it's sunny. You don't need 1/4000th of a second. It's a bird just hanging out. But I am at 1/4000th of a second shutter speed at ISO 800 and at f8. And you decide to drop it to 100. All of a sudden, somebody shouts out, "Eagle," dives and grabs the thing and flies off with the bird. Can you honestly tell me you can change your ISO that quickly in that heat of the battle? Set it and forget it. There is no penalty for too much shutter speed. I'm asking you all, I've been asking this around the world lately. Has anybody ever told you, you know, you had 1/2000th of a second too much shutter speed? Give it back. Did that ever happen to anybody? I'm still waiting for it after 35 years. There is no penalty. We are no longer film shooters. We don't have to be at ISO 100. Today's digital camera, I haven't seen a camera body at ISO 800 that was horrible. I've seen, they're all phenomenal. Remember, I do night photography. That's at ISO other zip codes. Set it and forget it. There is no penalty for too much shutter speed. If you don't have enough shutter speed, then I can tell you, oh, you were at 1/2000th, 3200th of a second, you have got a blurry bird, you missed the focus point. I can rule out all the mistakes you make because of lack of shutter speed, because you didn't want to push your ISO. ISO 800, in my opinion, call it the new 100. ISO 800 on every camera body that I've seen on the market, and I've used them all at this point in time in my career, is fine for every camera body. Entry level or otherwise, you know, this is 1/3200th of a second. Last winter, I've got every wing position you can imagine in between that one and that one on this bird. So now I'm just focused on keeping that focus point on the body. I'll weed out the wing positions I don't like afterwards in post-processing. So this is a big one, 1/1600th of a second or faster. The more if you're brand new into it, I would recommend 1/2500th of a second or faster. And that would be raising your ISO. Because once I see you at 1/2500th of a second, except for a hummingbird, you should be fine. So again, 50-mile-per-hour fight, you know, this is handheld on the boat. So they're sharp because it's freezing my motion, the motion of the boat, the motion of the birds, 1/4000th of a second. It's freezing it. Handheld on a boat with a teleconverter. I'm in another zip code on this guy. So, you know, just try, look even at 1/3200th of a second. The body is sharp, but on the smaller birds, the wingtips are a little motion blur, which I'm okay with, you know, a certain amount. But honestly, if I really wanted to, I could have easily gotten to 1/5000th of a second by pushing my 1DX and not had a problem. So as far as camera gear is concerned, yes, focal length, focal length, focal length. You guys are very fortunate that you live in the state of Florida, because it is the only state that I've ever visited that the birds are so habituated to people, they're really not as freaked out as they are in the rest of the world. So that's why you're going to need focal length. So what's the difference of focal length? These are going to be full frame images. You have 100 to 400, which is a very light package with a teleconverter. 150 to 600s, the new 100, 500 for the mirrorless, 2 to 600s for some of them. Micro Four Thirds now have a 150 to 400, which is actually a 300 to 800 effectively. And don't get me wrong, I love my 500 millimeters of the world and 600 millimeter prime f4s. They're heavy and they have a price tag. I'm sure many of you are aware that Canon just introduced a 1200 millimeter RF for about what you can buy a car for, you know, so yeah, it's 30,000 or so. So again, they're not bad, they're just pricey. So 200 millimeter on a full frame. Welcome to New Jersey Wildlife. That's a 12-inch carving about 100 feet away from me. Because in most places outside of Florida, that's about as close as they're going to let you get. 400 millimeter full frame, 600 millimeter full frame. Now we're talking about by dropping on a camera, buddy, that's pretty cool. And look at what's happening to the background, particularly how it's getting beautiful. 600 millimeter with the teleconverter. I could live with this image, especially if it's flapping its wings. So realize that you have choices, but all of them come, this is my 3 to 800 on a crop sensor. That's a 12-pound lens. I just decided to take it out to play one time 3 years ago. I immediately had to ice my back as soon as I got home after this trip and pop Tylenol. So they're great. There's no question about it. But, you know, now when I start looking at some of them, now I travel internationally. Imagine getting on a plane with that monster, and it is called the Sig Monster, okay? So, and it's earned its nickname. It's 12 pounds, just the lens alone. And when I tried getting on a few flights, even here in the States, they kind of look at me like, yeah, no, that ain't happening. And then I have to take the tripod, the gimbal head, and then all that other good stuff. So I started to compare it, and this is a 150 to 600. I have now since used the Sigma version and the Tamron version of both with a teleconverter. And I'm like, okay, what's the difference? Well, the one difference is I didn't get home and have to ice my back with a 150 to 600. But, you know, all I care about on whose label is, I don't. I care about the images. There's a 3 to 800 image down here in Florida. So I'm only concerned, but can you tell from the images which lens? I can tell you that's the 3 to 800 Sigma. I can tell you that's a 150 to 600 contemporary Sigma. So you can't tell from the image quality. So the beauty of all these lenses, including now the Tamron that I've been using for the last 2 months, they're travel friendly. I can get on any plane, anywhere, anytime. So here's an image that I'm going to tell you that I captured with the 3 to 800 years and years ago. And here's the first image I ever captured with the 150 to 600 contemporary handheld on the boat. So little story, which is going to amuse you. So I've been married 31 years, together 37, 38, something like that. I've never been right in my marriage ever, except for this image. So this is why I like to tell the story. Sigma sends me the 150 to 600 contemporary. It is the second production lens in the world. So it's kind of a tester loaner. and they sent it to me, and the head of the pro program says, I'm going to send this to you so you can test it out, but don't go on the water and the sand or I happen to be at the Florida Camera Club Council conference coming up, but I was there way back when. And I go, you're sending it to me to Florida. That's kind of an oxymoron. They're surrounded by water and it's all sand. So he starts, telling me, hemming and on. I said, I yesed him to death. I did what my kids did, yeah. So he sends it down here in Florida. So I call up the captain of the boat and I said, hey, can we go out, to try this? My wife's down at the conference. I want to check out the new toy, right? Let me check it out. So he goes, sure, for you, I'll do that. I'll get to meet your wife. So I'm on the boat with this now 4-pound lens compared to what the other ones weigh, 600 millimeter at 4 pounds. And I'm using it. And this is one of the first images that pops up on my LCD. And she takes a picture of me zooming in on this image. I'm like, I can't believe this. There's no way $1,000 lens can do this. It was 1,000 at the time. It's a little less. And then I see her and I get pinged on my phone, way to go cell phones, that she tagged me in Facebook, social media. Roman doing what Roman loves. So I look at her, I go, are you trying to get me fired? I do a pretty good job on my own. Are you really trying to? And she goes, what? How is he going to know that you're on the boat with that lens right now? Those words left her mouth. Ping, my phone rings with a message from the head of the pro program saying, please tell me that's not you on the boat with the second lens in the world, never mind the country. I just point the phone to her. So the only time I've ever been right. And, she pulled it down. And of course I had to call him, sent him the images. And he's like, oh, you better get a blog post up soon, So I got away with that one. But did I really tell the difference between the two when all was said and done? This at the time, the 3D 800 was, I believe, around $7,000. This is $1,000 at 4 pounds compared to 12 pounds. So the technology, like I said, I'm using the Tamron G2 now. The technology has improved where you can use these lenses on a budget and they work fantastic. So 44 images in a row of these guys taking off. This is at Gatorland. I just care of how they perform. This was the first one, 44 with my 1DX. I'm like, it works. I'm a believer now. So what I'm trying to tell you is, yeah, the 600 millimeter f4s of the world are great. You need a tripod by and large and gimbal head, and they're a pain in the ass to travel with. While these, you can probably stick in your pocket of a jacket in a pinch and get on a plane if they give you problems. Again, the Bald Eagles in New Jersey, I went out last year. So when you want to start raising the bar, you're done photographing the portraits, this and this, you have your ISO set, and now you are basically focusing on acquiring and keeping focus, because depth of field is probably always there. So when they're dancing like this, don't get closer to them. I know that's the temptation we all have. Back up, back up, back up. Get as far back away, because they got a decent 2.5 wing spread if it's left to right. And when they curl their wings and down. So always remember, don't use that lens if you're using one of the 150 to 600s at the 150 range. Use them at the 600 millimeter range, 500 millimeter range. Always keep in mind that you want to back up, because then you're going to do feeding. So that's the thing, feeding. This is probably the only exception to the rule for the whites, because it's a gray card. A little blue heron is almost a gray card. So you might have to get a little brighter, but trust me, if you're close enough, you'll be able to bring him up. Like the game of whack-a-mole here, the Anhingas, you don't know. I'm just following the bubbles. And as soon as they come up out of the bubbles, I'm just hoping I lock and load, you know. Again, feeding oyster catchers out on Long Island, but look at the detail I have in my blacks and my whites because of the time of day. Shadow is soft. This was just taken at the Venice Rookery. So even though it's a darker bird, I was able to bring up most of the detail in it and yet maintain all the detail in the whites. Same thing, this guy was at the Venice Rookery. So preening, mating, nest building, these are from the Venice Rookery not even a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago. Week and a half ago at the Venice Rookery where they're nest building. So once you have the light at your back, zone, this and that, I want you to look at all these images and see how you got light in the eyeballs, detail in the feathers. I can tell you right now that that background was a little darker than what it was to the original site, but I lightened it up a little bit in post-processing by just pulling up the blacks. Mating. I probably got every species known mating to man, but I still follow the same rules. Sun at my back. And again, this is about a week and a half ago at the Venice Rookery. I rarely see them with the head out. So this was a first to me. So when you want to have the birds in flight, I'm going to have to update this one because AI servo is for Canon, continuous is for Nikon. I don't know what Olympus has or Sony, but they have similar settings where it continues. And now with the eye detection, and some of them have the animal detection systems built into the cameras, they really, really have raised the bar for birds in flight. So by having the ISO philosophy of high ISO, high shutter speed, now the focus is really starting to get on par with all those other things. So start with the center point focus. Keep it in your zone, but now pay attention to the wind direction. Birds are airplanes. They're going to want to land and take off into the wind. So if I see a west wind in the morning, I'm probably not even going to go out to go photograph them because they're going to fly away from me. They're going to fly and take off into the wind. So if I have an east wind in the morning or a west wind in the afternoon, oh yeah, you bet you I'm going out for that. Because if the sun's setting and the wind's straight at my back, they're going to fly right at me. So keep the wind direction in mind. And by knowing that, I can better position myself when I'm in the boat, standing on the ground, wherever it is. Low light, light angle. The wings are getting iridescent because of the low light. This is out from New Mexico, the Festival of Cranes, where I've taught 7 times or 8 times. This is actually a Nikon camera system because my Canon gear was lost in Mexico, not in New Mexico. So as long as I know how to change the ISO, the f-stop, the shutter speed, I can pretty much use any system. And I believe they are all capable of it. Like I said, I've used Canon, Nikon, Sony, and Olympus systems so far. Probably another one, but I can't remember. I've used them all. They all work great. So pick a system that's comfortable for you and your budget. They all work. Smaller a bird, the degree of difficulty goes up. But when you have a wind right at your back, these are the poses potentially you're going to get. So no go away birds, move yourself. So I did, and there you go. Now I have the correct light position angle slightly towards me instead of away from me on the go away bird. Everything's illuminated a little better. So just keep that in mind, but start tracking early. So you had my zone. I don't start tracking when they're in the zone. I start tracking when they're way outside of it. I start tracking at 200 millimeters and find them because 600 millimeters is hard. Oh, there they are. Lock my focus, lock my focus. Now, somebody's always going to ask me, do I use back button focus? No, because I'm a trained monkey with this finger that I've been doing this for the last 30 years, locking and acquiring with the top button. I do know back button focus works very well, especially when you're starting out. Why don't I use it? Because I tend to move my focus point and kind of try and adjust the thumb to do both is a little awkward. So if you acquire the focus early and you zoom and you keep that focus locked, whether it's the top button or back button focus, they should all be sharp. So you'll hear me say, wait for it, as they start coming into the zone, fire in the hole, and then somewhere over here, follow through and stop. You know, so for good technique, hand holding especially, drink beer. This beer gut just isn't for show, it's for technique, and I'm sticking to that story. Because when I hold my lens, I tuck it up against my belly and chest, and I drop the lens here. So now I'm able to rotate my hips to smoothly follow my subject. It is practice. Birds in flight are practice, practice, practice. But with the settings, I just had a client last week, first time ever photographing birds in flight, and she was getting keepers because of the settings. The more you do it, the more proficient you will become. But on this guy, I knew he was landing on this perch back and forth, grabbing bugs. I manually focused on the perch, waited for him to start flying back, opened up my, crop a little bit to make sure, I got clipped wingtips on the 2 frames before, and then I finally got one good one. What do I care? It's digital. Top side view is one of my favorite, and one of the rare times that I will shoot when the sun is a little higher, especially if I'm standing on a cliff, because then you get the whole top side of the bird. But it's a little difficult here in Florida. The garbage dumps are your hills, and that's not usually the best place, although there's eagles there. So no matter what, again, 1/2500th of a second, you're getting a little motion blur, which again is fine in most cases. But if I want to eliminate that, I better keep that speed up. So the smaller the bird, the degree, these are winter visitors for us in New Jersey. But again, as long as I can keep that focus point on that bird's body, it won't get fooled by the water. But that is a tough exposure. Realize that it's going to take some practice for you to be ripping these off. Peregrine falcon, these are along the Jersey Palisades, almost on the New York border. I went out last year again to do that. So you know how fast they are. So again, combine the right time of day, the zone, and everything else, and you're going to be getting these on a regular basis. It works. Like I said, when I do my bird photography workshops, clients come home with hundreds of gigs of these guys. The one thing I didn't mention, because he's a good friend of mine, cards. Whether you're using an SD or a CF, whatever you're using, use the fastest card you can afford. I don't like spending anybody's money, including mine, on gear. But when I had the Sony A9, I bought a 400 time read and write card speed, where it reads 400x and writes 400x. They're expensive, but they don't fill the buffer. So consider your camera a Ferrari at 10, 20 frames a second, 30 frames a second on some of these mirrorless guys. You need a card that can handle writing all those megapixels quickly. So, the better the camera body, the more pro end it is. It has a bigger buffer as well. I'm gonna say I probably generally do 20, not 20, 5 or 7 bursts in a sequence when I'm photographing birds. It's hard to tell because it sounds like a machine gun going off. But if your card isn't fast enough to write the information, so we're photographing, we saw the osprey dive, a good friend of mine, he's a pro, excellent bird photographer, says, oh my God, my card's full, reaches into his bag, grabs the card, stuffs it in his camera. And we're both like, wind direction's right, turn to the osprey. He turns right in front of us and you hear my camera, 30 images I rip off. I got 2 with the upwing position, 2 with the downwing position, and everything in between, of course. I only like the up and down usually. And I hear him go, curse, curse, curse. He put in a slow landscape card that you don't need the speed. So his high-end pro camera body was not fast enough, or the card wasn't fast enough to read or write all that information, and he missed the shot. So I don't know, they have so many designations on these cards nowadays. I really don't know what they are. You know, some are XQDs, you know, you might as well throw the alphabet out there, one of them. So ask whoever you buy your gear from or friends what cards they use, because you need for bird photography in particular, you need fast cards. And on that, I am going to end for questions and stop my share because you guys all got that.
Hey, Roman, it's Gordy. Let me just ask you something that popped up in the chat.
Okay.
Somebody, and I think I already know the answer, but I'll let you give it away. But the question was, why not just use auto ISO? If you're going to set the aperture and you're going to set the shutter speed, why not just use auto ISO? And I'll let you answer that.
Okay, so a bird in flight in particular can be against the cloudy sky that you have behind you, or could be against the dark mangroves on the sandy beach, even if they're all in the same zone, shooting zone that I mentioned. So when you're panning a bird flying and it pans from the beach, right, gray, you know, sand, and you put it on auto ISO, and now you're panning towards the mangroves, the really dark mangroves. Well, your meter's going to tell your camera, whoa, you got to jack your ISO up because it's a very dark background. We need to expose more. Hence, you're going to blow out the bird. So in birds in flight in particular, where the background changes, auto ISO just doesn't work. Your meter will get fooled by the background, not intentionally. It's fast action, you know, and unless you keep that point on there, it's going to say, okay, dark background. Now it flies against the sky and it might say, okay, drop it to 100 ISO. You know, so it's going to get fooled by the background, and that's why no auto ISO. Why not just set it at 800 and forget it? George Foreman Grill is going to get to me at one point for that comment. I'll play.
Yeah, the point is that your camera's meter is going to try and find the sweet spot for whatever's in your frame, and
Right.
whether it's adjusting your aperture or your shutter speed or your ISO, it's the same meter adjusting for what it thinks it needs to have. So even if you set your shutter speed and your aperture and you leave your ISO on auto, your camera just has one variable to change now instead of 2 or 3. So it's going to change that one variable and give you what it thinks is correct. And your point is you need to expose for the white, and that means all 3 of your exposure triangle components have to be set manually,
Right.
and then you just go from there.
Right.
I think,
And everything.
one of the easiest ways to describe that is no matter what your background is, light, dark, medium, the bird's always going to be in the same light.
Right.
That will never change according to the background. So you can do it in manual because the bird will always be in the same light.
Right. Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you, to keep that bird in that same light.
Right.
You know, and that is the thing. Yeah, so the whole concept of the camera is, and I don't know, somebody once explained it to me a long time ago, your camera's trying to make everything gray. What is it, 16, 18% gray? That's what it's trying to make your do. So it's trying to make white gray. It's trying, because it's, for whatever reason, that's the way cameras were designed. Well, white isn't gray, black isn't gray, you know. But my thing is, remember the bald eagle, because your meter is going to pick up that dark background or pick up that light water or gray skies, you know. So if you have the exposure for the white in the correct lighting position, your meter won't get fooled by anything else. You know, it's not going to be able to get fooled because it's not going to change anything.
Super. Anybody else got any comments or questions for Roman?
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you're gonna take a best picture of a bird, when is the best time to take a picture of any bird activity going on? I mean, I'm aware that it could be mostly at the beginning of the year from January to April, right?
Well, right now, down here in Florida, in particular, you guys are a little bit higher from me, but right now I've been photographing chicks at the Venice Rookery. So the Venice Rookery already has chicks, some of them the second one. It is a little early for some of them. So I would say Florida in particular, and especially where you guys are, I would say from now through the end of May, early June.
I see. And I did got glimpses of birds around that time. Like in the first today, I went with Promise to the Brevard Zoo, and there were like a few nesting sites for gray herons, and I took one of the chicks there.
Yeah. So for you guys, Gatorland, I think usually starts mid to late March, which is near the Orlando area.
Right. April is a good time for that. The club is usually gone there every year until COVID, in either early May, but recently it's been late April.
Right. So that's a good one. You guys have Lake Blue Cypress close to you for the ospreys. I'm not sure how close you guys are to the San Sebastian Inlet.
Oh yeah, very close.
That has a lot of osprey activity going on now, from what my friends are telling me. So check the wind directions and head out there. But you know, Florida, by and large, I would say, from, you know, I've been down here since July. I want to say really it started picking up mid-January down here in southern Florida, but it'll probably continue all the way through May. And the further north you go in the state, St. Augustine Alligator Farm, we're doing the festival there in mid to late April. So that'll be April 20th or that. So the alligator farm will have plenty of chicks and nests and everything else like that. But they can vary depending on temperature, time of year, you know, but by and large, I think you're good in Florida from January through beginning of June at least.
We had a question on the chat. Where in New Jersey were you living, or were you from?
Yeah, there, you know, what exit? 138 is going to be the exit. So
There you go. Exit 138.
I literally 13 miles outside of New York City most of my life. So we just moved down here in July.
Well, welcome to the warmer climes. I know I'm from Buffalo, and I just saw an article today that this year Buffalo is leading the entire nation in snowfall, the measured snowfall for the year.
I saw some of the snows they had. I was like,
terrible.
God, over the door. I was like, what? You know, the lake effect snow. Yeah. So we weren't.
Roman, I have a question for you, Roman.
Sure.
You mentioned several times in the program with the sun behind you in the right zone, light in the eye, light in the eye, light in the eye. Now, is that just the sunlight hitting the eye, or is that what they refer to as catch light in the eye? And is catch light really 100% needed.
Well, I think it adds a certain element of depth, but remember, so the higher the light angle is, so the burrowing owls in particular, and some of the other that I'm gonna go with the whole owl species that I know of, all of them, have a very, pronounced eyebrow area, where it's over the eye. So if the sun angle is very high, the brow is going to cast a shadow over half the eye or more. So the light angle being lower is getting right into their eye. So, on owls in particular, you got to be careful with the light angle and the time of day. Some other birds, you can get away with a little bit later. But, here down in South Florida anyway, once I start seeing my shutter speed hit the 1/5000th mark at f8 ISO 800, I know it's starting to get too harsh. It's starting to get where, when you start squinting, that's usually when you're going to start losing feather detail, especially in the whites.
Well,
And I
how,
see, yes, gray-headed swamp hen. Yes, I remember it now.
how important is that catch light if one's not in the eye?
You should be getting it even on an overcast day. If your exposure, like, so you have a gray sky, you still will probably get it.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say it's that critical. It's just that's what I get, so that's what I usually get with the sun at my back and the right time of day.
So follow what you presented to us. You should always get some kind of catch light most of the time.
Yes. All right. Somebody just asked, are there any burrowing owls on this coast? The answer is yes. But I don't know about that high up, but look up Brian Piccolo Park. And I want to say it's in the Fort Lauderdale area.
That's correct.
I have a question.
Sure.
How do you expose for the white when the bird is in motion?
All right, so I exposed before I even got there. So when I'm in the parking lot, like I said, I put the sun at my back, sun's starting to rise. I take a picture of a white car in the parking lot, film the frame with the white. So now I know when I get out there into the field, doesn't matter if the bird is filling this much of my frame or that much of my frame, I know it's the correct exposure for white. And that's why I use the car trick, a car, a sign, it started to dawn on me that I've seen signs like at the Venice Rookery on here, when they had a little white sign with the write-up of the Venice Rookery. So I took the shot of the sign, with my 600 just to check my white. So I had no blown highlights. So the white of an American flag, it doesn't have to totally fill it. You just want to make sure you have enough white that you can tell that your highlights aren't blown.
Thank you. I did remember you saying that earlier.
All right, good. No problem. Hey, the card trick works. Trust me. I tell people, I said, I do that card trick so I don't even have to think in the morning. Although I do know where the exposure is most of the time before I get out, but it just gives reinsurance. Okay, there's a white sign, click, take the picture, no blown highlights, and good to go.
I have a question. How would you take a picture when everything is like really too white, like a snow owl at a beach with white sand and a pretty light gray sky in the winter on Long Island?
So one of my favorite images of all time is white on white, I call it, a high key image. So in that case, you're going to want to take a picture of something that has the white and gray tone. And it doesn't matter where the sky goes. That's one of the exceptions to the rule. So I'll take a picture, let the sky get blown out, make sure that my owl isn't blown out. I use the same technique for flowers, where I have a bright sky, and I'll make sure the flowers are just before they're blown, and the sky's going to get all blown out, but the flowers are correct. So the similar method, so for you on Long Island, for the snowies, yes. And I tell you what, it's going to look like a painting if you nail it. It's going to be really, really spectacular if you get it against the gray sky, and then you get the detail on the feathers, it'll look really sharp.
Thank you.
I have a question on the white balance, Roman. In the morning, the white balance is going to change from before sunup to 2.5 hours. Do you constantly change your white balance? I know you shoot raw and it doesn't matter, but do you have any suggestions about white balance?
Yeah, I shoot auto. That's the one thing I put on auto. Because I shoot raw, I can change the white balance. And as you mentioned, first thing in the morning, the whites can look too yellow, too red, especially on the Canon system. Well, then I can go back when I'm shooting raw and either manually adjust the white balance, put in a little more cold blue to get them to have more detail. But you could also do it in Photoshop. You can do it, in any software program that you choose after, adjust the color balance. So one of the few things that I do use on auto is white balance, but that's because I'm shooting raw, and that way I could change it. All right, see somebody using a photo disc, because half the times I forget to bring the things I need. Yes, there are the things that you can use to check your exposure. But when you're running out in the morning and you're half asleep and it's like, yeah, I forgot that thing, and it's just like, all right, I'm going to make do without it. I just think shooting something white that you're going to find in the field, you're going to go grab your cup of coffee, you're in the 7-Eleven lot, there's the white and red sign. Take a picture of that, the American flag that's in a lot of the hotel. So I think just everywhere around you, the white pipe that they have sticking out of the ground somewhere, it just makes it easier without having to carry more stuff. And then when you're sitting there, and if you do have clouds in the sky, sun's at your back, you can always take a quick test shot of the cloud to make sure you have no blown highlights when the action's a little slower. So, it's always usually around you if you just take the time to look.
So I should go out and buy a white car?
You'll find it in the parking lot, trust me.
Especially in Florida. Yeah, they're everywhere. They're everywhere.
We just traded in our white car for a gray one, so now I have a gray car. But there's somewhere silver one will work. So you've got a car definitely there somewhere that you could find it.
As long as it's an 18% gray car.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, how about it, everybody? Thanks for Roman.
I've got hold on, I've got another thing. Roman,
Okay.
I saw a lot of beautiful pictures today, and you mentioned that a lot of them were from a boat. Are those the typical pictures folks would get on one of your workshops? You've got some workshops coming up, 2-day and 4-day.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to send you guys a 1-dayer that will be also off the boat in case people want to just check it out. Yes, and what I remind people is, being from New Jersey, I never had a straight sight line. I couldn't see the horizon when I was in New Jersey. The trees were taller than my horizon. When we're out on the boat, on the river, or in the bay, we can track the birds much easier than we can anywhere else that I know of. So typically I'm going to say, I'll position the boat, sun at our back. We know what the wind direction is or where it's coming from. So I'll be like, we go to rookeries where it's like coming from the right, coming from the left, and basically then you're just worried about being able to find them and track them. So, and a pontoon boat being very stable, like I said, I only usually take 4 people on that boat, and it's a group. I have taken 5 against my better judgment, but again, people have the ability to be able to track them earlier and hence get more keepers.
Gotcha. Send us that information. We'll get it out for you.
All right, will do. So, all right, thank you.
All righty.
Everybody.
Well, thanks, Roman. We really appreciate it. I just this past weekend went out to the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge for a day or two, and it was, I think it was my first really dedicated trip just to shoot the birds and the wildlife out there. I had about 5 shots of very, very huge birds, but then after I looked at them closer in post, turns out they were alligators. But the birds were turned out really well, and I got some pretty good shots. But I will second your comments about shutter speed, because the first day I went out there and I was shooting at I think like 650 or 800 of a 800th of a second, something like that, with a 500 millimeter lens. And I used the old formula that whatever your focal length is, 1 over that in seconds, and you'll be okay. And I'm here to say it's not the case anymore, because you got so many megapixels, and the cameras today, I would double that at least.
Oh, and part of that is that if you were hand holding that shutter speed on a landscape, I can almost guarantee you with image stabilization that it would be sharp.
Right.
So a stationary portrait bird, fine. It didn't give you the little asterisk that the bird is cruising at 20 to 60 miles an hour. You know, everything's got an asterisk in photography.
And that's what, and so the next day I went out and I said, well, the heck with this, I'm going to go to manual, and I bumped it up, I think, to 1250, and did the shooting there, and it made perceptible difference. I mean, the Saturday shots were okay, but the keeper rate for Sunday was much better. And so it was a lesson learned there for with a 500 millimeter lens. It made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, when I'm on the boat, the beauty of doing the small groups, this is my 19th year doing this, is that I have a quiet voice, as you can tell. So when I shout out the settings on the boat, you can hear me, pretty much.
Yeah.
As you can ask my wife, I'm a quiet guy, And so, when I shout out, 1/2000th of a second or 1/2500th second, ISO 800 f8, that's the beauty of it, that you have me giving you the settings. And then after that, it's you like hyper focusing on tracking.
Yeah.
Practice. But that's the beauty of
Exactly.
it. When we go to the rookeries, the action's like, coming from the right, up high, above the trees, above the mangroves, coming in. So it's fun. It is definitely exciting bird photography, especially birds in flight.
Well, I would like, go ahead, Richard.
Robin, another question related to that. You mentioned birds from the right. You're obviously going to be panning right to left or left to right. What do you do with your stabilization? Do you turn off horizontal stabilization, leave vertical on, or turn it off completely?
So my rule, just because not everybody has a new lens, is once I hit 1/1600th of a second, I turn stabilization totally off. And the reason for that being, some of the older stabilization systems had a little slowdown, like they would grab it and then it would get fooled. At 1/1600th of a second, I don't think you need stabilization. We're not on, a boat that's doing that, nothing nearly that bad. So once I hit 1/1600th of a second, which is pretty quickly down here in Florida, I usually shut it off.
That's a good point.
I always say one extra motor running that I don't want running.
And chewing up your battery.
Yeah.
So anybody else got any questions for Roman? Okay, I'm going to do a quick screen share here for everyone, because this past weekend, we did a walkabout, a photo walk in the Eau Gallie Art District. And those of us who were there got a little blue card from Chuck with this link on the, if you look at the bottom there, the HTTPS business, with that link, and we were all supposed to post 5 of our shots. So if anybody who was not with us on that trip would like to go look and see what those of us who were on the photo walk were able to shoot, take a quick note of that or a screen capture and dial that in to your web browser, and you can take a look. You
I'd
may
like to
need,
make a comment with that, Gordon.
yeah, I was just gonna
I
say,
use Edge, Microsoft Edge as my browser, and that link does not work. However, when I turn my Chrome on, it works perfectly. So you be careful if you're using the Edge browser.
the only comment I have to that, Richard, is the first time I tried this, the EGAD part towards the end there, I had small letters and it didn't go. I changed them to the capital letters. In other words, I matched the characters exactly and it went fine. So maybe that has something to do with it.
No, it had absolutely nothing to do. I checked
Okay.
it, and I copied the links, and it worked in Chrome. It did not work in Edge.
Okay, so there you have it. And Walter's upset about it for some reason, but anyway, there you have it. If you want to go over and take a look at that, that would be it.
Some nice pictures up there too. Camera Club members did great photography on Saturday.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you,
it
Chuck,
was-
for putting that together.
Thank you, Chuck. And it was really great to get out and see the folks again, to chat about photography, walk around and scare everybody in the Oak Alley Art District.
Roman, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Roman. See ya.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
thanks, everybody. And we will sign off here. And thanks, everybody, for coming to the meeting. And look forward to May when we'll be back in person again for our meeting. And we're going to have some other events between now and then where we'll get some photo walks and other in-person events. So just keep your eyes peeled to the f-stop and the other email notifications that we have for you.
All right, good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Night.
Roman.
All right, thanks,
Good
Roman.
night.
Thank you, Roman.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.
See you later, everybody.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.